All right. Just some more people coming in. And we'll go ahead and begin because I know you have a lot to go through today, Linda. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How to Upskill Your Leaders' Change Capability to Continually Transform and Innovate with instructor Dr. Linda Ackerman Anderson. My name is Diana Bench, and I'll be your moderator. Today's webinar is part of a monthly series sponsored by the Center for Achieving Breakthrough, whose purpose is to convene, develop, and deploy conscious change leaders who can lead transformation in themselves, their organizations, and their communities. To view webinars on demand and access other free tools and resources from the center, visit breakthrough.beingfirst.com. So a little housekeeping before we begin. Linda will speak for about 60 minutes, and then we'll open it up for your questions at the end. Now, if you're in our webinar room, you can use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Now, if you're watching today live on social media somewhere and you'd like to join in on the chat, you can visit us at beingfirst.com/live. LIVE, and that will get you to our webinar room. Just follow the instructions and you can join us there. Our instructor today, Dr. Linda Ackerman Anderson, is an international speaker, best-selling author, and strategic advisor to the C-suite. For 40 years, Dr. Ackerman Anderson has been guiding visionary leaders of America's Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and global nonprofit organizations to transform themselves and their organizations to achieve breakthrough in business results, culture, leadership, and executive team performance. Industry experts regard Linda as a founding leader of organization transformation and a godparent to the OD community. And it's my honor to welcome Dr. Linda Ackerman Anderson. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Diana. Thank you so much and welcome everybody. Happy to have you here today to talk about something really important given the challenges we face in today's reality. So I'm going to be talking about how to upskill your leaders' change capability. I'm assuming that maybe you're in a leadership position or you're in a consulting position or an advisory position to leaders. So this has everything to do with things that you can begin to introduce them to continually succeed at transforming and innovating as they proceed. So hang on one second, let me get this going. So my purpose today is to explore with you how your leaders can actually increase their ability and the ability of the organization to lead the complexities of transformational change in today's constantly changing reality. We are living in a different world right now, and the transformations that have been triggered by the COVID realities and political realities around the world are absolutely challenging our ability to stay present, successful, and to thrive and to adapt to what's required of us. So my agenda today, also in terms of my purpose, I'm going to share with you the paradigm shift to conscious change leadership, moving from change management all the way up through conscious change leadership. So my agenda today is to talk a little bit first about the challenges we face, why a paradigm shift is needed, a different perspective for leaders and for us about how we proceed to support transformation, oversee it, and ultimately succeed at it. It requires new ways of thinking, and that's part of what I'm going to share with you today. I'll introduce conscious change leadership, which is a significant up-leveling of our approaches to change and absolutely fit for today's reality. I'm going to share with you 5 key strategies for conscious change leaders. These are 5 of many, actually. I've picked out 5 for today that go along directly with supporting conscious change leaders and upskilling your leaders. And then we'll close with some Q&A, and we have an offering for you as well to dive deeper into what we're talking about today. So I want to share a little bit about the challenges we face today. None of this will be new news to you. The reality of our world has changed largely because of COVID, but also political issues as well. There's a lot of uncertainty about new directions. How do we take advantage? How do we operate in a different reality with greater complexity and greater volatility? We are not standing on solid ground anymore, so to speak. And so how do we become more agile, adjust, and keep our transformations going? A lot of leaders are scratching their heads today. We can't get there from here. How do we get there? And where's there? And how do we proceed, given so much of our work is now virtual? Traditional approaches are not working. Traditional approaches are not working. That's part of the paradigm shift I want to share with you today. We have a lot of overwhelm about transforming virtually. And there's a lot to be said about the kinds of technology like we're on today that enable us to be able to keep things going virtually. How do we know we're on track when dynamics keep shifting under our feet? What is it we're observing? What is it we're looking at? How do we actually know we're moving in the right direction? And you can add other items to this, but this is just a beginning, tip of the iceberg about how our reality has shifted. And what it leads us through to is a critical change leadership decision. And that is, we need to succeed at transformation, but doing so requires breaking free of mainstream thinking and approaches, breaking free of how we've done it in the past, and making the paradigm shift in our leadership of transformation. So I want to share with you, because I feel strongly about this, we can raise the bar of possibility of more successful outcomes when we develop new capabilities that are fit for the realities that we're currently facing. So there are significant paradigm shifts, and I just want to point this out and then give you a little further exploration of it. So change management and project management are the traditional approaches that most leaders rely on, especially project management. Change management has come along a couple decades ago now, and so it too is in many ways strongly valued. But both change management and project management are not adequate for the transformational challenges we face. So building on that, the next paradigm shift is from change management to change leadership. So how do we oversee, set up for success, orchestrate the process? I'll go into this shift here shortly. There's another paradigm shift beyond this, and that is conscious change leadership. That's the heart of what we're talking about and what we're teaching here at Being First. And I will share with you more about conscious change leadership, that it includes and transcends change leadership and change management and project management. This is not a replacement, it's an expansion. And it's an expansion that requires a paradigm shift, a new way of viewing ourselves, our capabilities, and the challenges that we're facing. To introduce you to really probably the strongest summary of all of what we need to pay attention to through the lens of conscious change leadership, we have the Conscious Change Leader Accountability Model. So as I go through this, I'm going to describe this to you. I want you to think about what aspects of this model do you pay particular attention to? What is it that you are focusing your support, your services, your branding on as I go through this? I'm going to talk through the whole thing, and then we'll look at it through the lens of change management, project management, change leadership, and then ultimately conscious change leadership. So the accountability model starts with 4 quadrants. And by the way, the 4 quadrants were originally outlined by Ken Wilber in integral theory. Some of you may be familiar with integral theory and Ken Wilber's work. So this is the summation of his brilliant work. So there are 4 quadrants on the front face. 2 of them on the left-hand side focus on internal dynamics inside of people that are inside of the organization or the system. There are 2 quadrants on the right that focus on external dynamics, realities, things we can observe, touch, design. Then there are the top two focus on individuals, what individual people address internally and externally. And then the bottom two are of the collective, us as a team, as a group, as a system. The focus areas of each of the quadrants. So for internal individual is mindset, how we view the world, our paradigms, our values. And individual external is behavior, what we actually do, what is observable, the information we use, how we make plans. At the collective level, we have culture, which is internal to people in general as they relate and work together. And, you know, the norms and the ways in which we operate together, our relationships. And then systems. Now, systems is a term, a label that Wilbur has given to this quadrant. It means many, many, many things. So this is all the structures and systems and technology and models and ways we approach, standards, models that we use to approach whatever the work is. So it's all the formal, tangible design of the organization. Those are the focus areas of the four quadrants. We need to attend to all of them. From the levels of system, you can see along that panel, individual, relationship, team, organization, and marketplace. Your work may or may not address all levels of system. It may just go to relationship or team. Maybe you address at the organization level, interfacing with the market. All levels are definitely required. And then lastly, the top panel is designing the change process to address all quadrants and all levels as we proceed through a major change, a transformational change. So the change process touches everything else in how we figure out what needs to be done and how we're going about doing it. So the easiest definition here would be planning, but that is a small portion of what's required to consciously design a change process to address all of the quadrants and all of the levels. So there's the accountability model. Now, lenses through which we work. The change management lens is largely, not completely, but largely the behavior quadrant. Change management focuses on handling the people dynamics, stakeholder management, communications, training plans, and adoption metrics and analytics. And so all around how people are taking on the change. So it's not the whole cube. It's not all of the quadrants or levels, but it definitely addresses the external behavior for sure, some of the systems as it relates to managing stakeholders. So then in addition, if we look at project management focuses largely on the systems quadrant. The content solution is the focus. Get us the right outcome, the right solution, and figure out how to deploy it. Project management focuses on predetermined scope, schedule, budget at the very early portions of the change process. The orientation is managed to the plan, minimize changes. Whoa, that's a misfit for transformation. And generally speaking, project management hands off its work, ends its work after deployment, gives it over to the organization. People and culture come later, or they're not even on the screen. Look at the other quadrants. Behavior, mindset, culture, not in the project management mindset. And there's no attention to leadership development here. There may be a very little attention to leadership development and change management. There is none here. It's been, the project is given to a project team and they proceed to figure out the right solution. So project management doesn't cover the cube either. Now, when we shift to change leadership, the paradigm shift here is that we add process to the quadrants that have already been addressed. The paradigm shift is intentionally and strategically designing the change process to integrate people and content. So there isn't a separate project plan from a change management plan. It's an integrated process that enables people to address, or the change leaders to address, all at least the behavior systems quadrant, some of the culture. So designing the process is the key leverage point here. We're proactively setting up conditions for success, launch to sustained results. I'm going to talk about this as one of the 5 key strategies shortly. We set up, sponsor is up-leveled from bless and delegate, which is how most sponsors see themselves. I like this, go ahead and do it. You have my permission, go forth. That's bless and delegate, to becoming sponsors who are active and ongoing champions and models of what's being asked of the organization. That begins to take place here in change leadership. A very unique aspect here is that the executive sponsor identifies what we call a change process leader and creates a partnership with a change process leader. This is a significant paradigm shift beyond the project manager role, which typically is what's put in place in charge of the project team. So that's a whole webinar in itself, much more information about the change process leader role. But that's a significant shift here that takes place in change leadership, this partnership, because the change process leader guides the work of the project managers and the change managers so that they're doing throughout the process the work required all the way from the very beginning of launch to sustained business benefits. That's the critical designing of the process. In change leadership, we're also talking about early and continuous stakeholder engagement. Now, change management does a lot of stakeholder engagement or stakeholder management, which is about getting people out off their resistance and through the adoption curve, which is great. Change leadership goes further. It's early and continuous stakeholder engagement that, and again, I'll be talking more about this as one of our 5 skill areas as well. And change leadership aligns project operations and the project itself, so that there's an interface between the normal running of the business and the change work that's going on. It also ensures that the initiative, the transformation, is integrated with other initiatives. And lastly, because the change leadership is focused on designing the process, there needs to be, for transformation to succeed, continuous course correction. So there are a series of 120-day approximately rolling plans based upon what shows up and what is needed in the transformation. So right here, I would ask you to reflect on the shift from change management and project management to change leadership, designing the process from beginning to end. Do you have the ability to do that? Are you positioned to do that? From literally launch, gee, I think this is a good idea, all the way through applause, praise, thank you, we've achieved and sustained successful benefits from the change. That's change leadership. Now, let's take it further into conscious change leadership. This is again, a significant shift. Conscious change leadership addresses all quadrants, all levels, and process design. So again, it builds, incorporates the work of change leadership and change management and project management. When we look at what is in conscious change and leadership, the conscious part of it, now careful attention here, is you working to wake up leaders and yourselves to conscious awareness and mindfulness, transforming from the inside out, changing the way we think, changing our paradigm, changing our mindset about what's required to succeed at transformation. In the development of conscious awareness in leaders and in ourselves, we develop higher states and stages of consciousness. It's not just, gee, that's a good idea. We're really looking at shifting longer term, deeper, more complex systems and raising the ability of leaders to do that. And it's also supporting leaders to understand how to work with the system in the flow of what's happening in the reality of the organization. So flow state also becomes a part of this. So the conscious part is a radical addition, expansion to how we support leaders from the beginning of change, or in general to build their change leadership capability. The change part of this is creating roadmaps for change for the different levels of system. And it's so we have roadmaps for transforming individuals, relationships, teams, the organization going through the transformation and its interface with the marketplace. How do we go about doing these things? What roadmaps, what models are we using? Change is also learning to consciously design and lead transformation at all levels of the system. How do we, again, be building on change leadership, consciously design to incorporate the consciousness aspect, the culture aspect that's so essential in transformational change, and guide the organization and individuals through it. The leadership component of conscious change leadership is moving beyond command and control. And here in this complex reality that's so frequently changing under our feet, a lot of control needs show up. You probably noticed that. And so this is looking at how do we transcend the control needs, the command and control, and learn to lead co-creatively, which is about unleashing human performance in others. So that's why the early and often engagement, we shift the way in which we do communications, we shift the way in which we solve problems and get other stakeholder voices into the system. It's learning to lead co-creatively. So conscious change leadership, a significant shift. In particular for us, it's being able to be positioned to do the leadership development work so leaders welcome our ability to influence them. They're open to it, they're willing to do it, they're aligned with developing themselves, as opposed to go out in the organization and do it out there. This whole piece has a lot to do with leadership evolution, so to speak. What we're after here in terms of waking leaders up to a larger perspective, as I mentioned, it's developing leaders from the inside out. So it's more than a coaching session, it's more than a training session. It's a lot of interventions over time so that they begin, or we begin to gain greater self-awareness. This is a very critical leverage point. If you can see your mindset in action in the moment and understand whether or not it is supporting the outcome or inhibiting the outcome, and learning how to change that mindset in the moment, being much more mindful, you have much greater power to influence the process successfully. So self-awareness and being able to see one's mindset in action and be able to shift it. It's being able to center amidst the chaos so that we can think and act more clearly, because there's a lot of overwhelm in what we're addressing now. I mean, on a daily basis here in the States, it's so significant that the number of dynamics we're all dealing with politically, organizationally, socially, in terms of our health, et cetera. So how do we go about staying centered amidst all the chaos? That's a part of the conscious piece. It's knowing the power of modeling and leaders being coaches to others. We frequently think of the coaching intervention as coaching leaders. This is developing leaders to coach their leaders, their staff, their teams to be models to the organization. It's increasing their capability to see the whole system, to design the process over time through all of its fluctuations in ways that address all four quadrants. That's a lot. That's a capability that gets developed over time. The offering that we're going to give you teaches how to do that, by the way, in both of the programs that we're going to talk about at the end. I want to share 5 new best practices with you for you to consider any one of them to move in this direction. And so that's where we're going to go next. So conscious change leadership. Again, embracing change leadership, embracing change management and project management, and going beyond it, seeing all of those traditional approaches through a new set of lenses to see how best to optimize them to address the chaos that we feel. The outcome of all of this is increased leader ability to see solutions to the organization's most complex challenges, including its transformation. This reduces the chaos, it reduces the overwhelm, because we're learning practices for how to see that complexity and find our way through it to a viable new reality. I want to, before I go into the 5 practices, I want to set the context for them by sharing with you where these practices take place. So this little model, we call it the full stream transformation model, shares the 3 major stages of change, the change process. So first up is upstream change, which is where these 5 practices take place, by the way. Upstream change is setting the foundations for success. I ask you, is your work about setting the changes up for success, working with leaders directly, developing them to establish the case for change, the desired outcomes, the conditions for success? Those kinds of things we'll be talking about. Upstream change is getting ready, lining up all the ducks, and positioning ourselves to be successful. Midstream change, this is largely where project management lives, is about designing the solution and looking at the impact of that solution on the organization so we can come up with an implementation plan. And a lot of change management work is ensuring that implementation leads us to adoption of the new state. So a lot of implementation downstream work there. So what's important here is knowing that successful transformation or any complex level change requires full stream oversight, full stream strategy, upstream, midstream, and downstream. So we have discovered over the course of decades, I'm at this 48 years now, that the least attended stage of leading transformation is upstream, setting the foundations for success. The traditional models jump right in later in the process. And what we need to do is backpedal right up to how do we, from the moment we realize the wake-up call, we have to move into setting ourselves up for success. Our in-depth guidance system is the Change Leaders Roadmap. Some of you may be familiar with this. If you want to learn more about this 9-phase model, it's got, again, 45 years of proven track record in it. The book, The Change Leaders Roadmap, is the one to get about that. So for us, I'm not going to talk you through the 9 phases, but I want you to know that it starts all the way up from hearing the wake-up call, which is, yeah, this is a good idea or a necessity for us to take on a change, all the way through preparing to lead the change, designing it, implementing it, and learning and course correcting as we go. Where this overlays with the full stream process, the first 3 phases, all the way from hearing the wake-up call, prepare to lead the change, create organizational vision and commitment and capability, and then assessing the situation to determine design requirements. This is all the upstream portion, and that's where these 5 strategies fit. So I want to share with you the 5 strategies. I'll name them, and then we're going to go into each of them. So first up, again, these are organized for conscious change leadership, as well as change leadership, and everyone involved in change management and project management can take on any of these. And I strongly encourage you to consider these. So as I go through them, I'll name them first here. I want you to consider how much of this work you already do, you might get positioned to do, and how to begin to make the case for them and sell them inside the organization by expanding your brand. So the 5, just to name them: clarify and align to the case for change and desired outcome. Right up at the beginning, why are we doing this and what do we hope to achieve? So first up is around that. Second, creating and sustaining conditions for success. What has to be in place for us to be successful in overseeing this transformation and bringing it to fruition? Third is engaging stakeholders early and often. And I'll describe the shift of the expansion of stakeholder engagement as we get here. Fourth, creating or clarifying boundary conditions and design requirements before we ever get to design. This is an extremely powerful and essential way that leaders can shape the outcome that they're wanting in the organization. And lastly, because transformation is so emergent, we're figuring so much out as we go. I mean, we're feeling this on a daily basis today. How do we establish rapid course correction as a mainstream practice for leading transformation? Because we'll get smarter by the day through creating rapid course correction. So there's the 5. I'm going to go into each one with a little bit more depth. So this is a bit of a flyby, a little bit of a fire hose for you. So I want you to be thinking, do I understand what this is? Do I understand its intent? And how could I go about infusing this into my approach to change? So to begin with, case for change and desired outcomes. So what is a case for change? It's a clear statement of why we're changing, what the necessity for the change is, the need, and the opportunity. Case for change needs to be compelling. It needs to be really clarifying what the opportunity is, as well as if we don't, what's the risk? Then, we're attempting to get people into the boat through understanding the relevance and meaning of the change we're asking of them. That's case for change. And by the way, it's not just developing it for the leaders, it's developing it in a way to be communicated to your stakeholders so they get the aha, they get the understanding, and therefore are more willing to address it. So this is very early in upstream change. Then the next part of this is being really clear about desired outcomes. Now, the paradigm shift here is all quadrants. It's not just systems. It's not just a new structure. It's not just increased sales. It's not just, new technology platform. What about in each of the 4 quadrants we're going to create in order to fully establish what's possible in our future? It's got to be compelling. It's got to be creative. It's got to be something radically different than what we're doing now. And it helps identify what in the organization and workforce needs to change. Not everything. We're not throwing it all up in the air, even in transformation. What in the organization needs to change? Think through all 4 quadrants. And I want to emphasize the need to look at mindset and culture, because that is so much of what will drive the paradigm shift to a transformational outcome. Then the third part of this, and also the results you will achieve. People want to know, it's too easy for leaders to jump to metrics, and which is not a compelling vision. Metrics are not compelling. Well, they're compelling, but they're threatening. And so what we're after here is what's compelling, what gets people in the guts. The paradigm shift here is not just the identification and writing up and communicating of these things. It's getting leaders and stakeholders to align to them in hearts and minds. How do you get leaders to be all in? to be all in on the case for change and desired outcomes. And so again, so many of us are challenged by making the presentation about these things and getting the head nod. You know, it's like what I call the bobblehead. That's not alignment. That's superficial. It's head level. How do you get leaders to address what they believe are the impacts on them and their team and the organization so they can more fully get behind taking the organization on this journey? So 3 pieces to this one: case for change, desired outcomes. Both need to be understood and compelling by your various stakeholder groups. And how do you get minimally leaders, optimally stakeholders to align, to say, yes, I'm fully committed, all in, I will help make this happen. I see the rationale. I understand the benefit. Getting full alignment. So that's number 1. The next strategy I want to talk about is conditions for success. What is it? Requirements that are essential to the achievement of desired outcomes. In essence, they're gas pedals for you, gas pedals for acceleration. And just very quickly, I will share with you the story where conditions for success got created. I was working with a very large oil and gas, actually electric and gas company. And they were going through a massive transformation. And there was an individual leader who was 3 years from retirement. He'd been around the block many times. He volunteered to orchestrate the whole thing. And on the first day, I walked into his office. He had a special office set up, and written all over his face since he volunteered was buyer's remorse. What in the world did I get myself into? How in the world are we going to do this massive transformation? And so I asked him, you have been in this organization for decades. You know what works here. You know what doesn't work here. You know where the weaknesses are. What would we have to put in place for you to be assured that this transformation can be successful? What factors, what conditions, what dynamics have to be established for this to work? And a light went on in his eyes. And he said, you mean we could do that? I said, otherwise we're just holding our nose and jumping in and hoping for the best. Why not set it up for success from the beginning, consciously, proactively? And so we did that. And we made special attempts to establish and monitor and sustain those conditions. Now, examples, the obvious ones. We need adequate resources. We need adequate capacity. We need the time to do this. Those are the obvious ones. And there's a lot of challenge, frequently pushback in these. But how do we identify not a luxurious amount, but an adequate amount of these as a condition for success? Your conditions for success might be states of being that support success, like leaders are open, leaders are mindful. There is a commitment to the big win, the overall outcome first, over and above any silo individual political agenda. There's a commitment to the larger win for the organization first. And that is sustained. So states of being, we don't frequently think about that, but how powerful is that if you can align your leaders to having the right frame of mind, mindset, way of responding to and supporting the change. Conditions for success might be new behaviors. Maybe it's the leaders being willing to tell each other the truth, or their underlings being willing to tell the truth to them, as opposed to only what they want to hear. Maybe it's open listening, active listening, so that we get the data we need in order to be able to adjust and course correct the transformation as we go. Maybe it's co-creating, listening, working with, engaging with others early in the organization. It might be leadership follow through. We made a decision. Now let's get that decision done rather than revisit, revisit, revisit. Maybe it's giving a strong voice to stakeholders whose lives are going to be radically changed. Giving a voice. So any of these, you would go about identifying, working with your leaders to identify conditions for success. What are ours? You can't have too many, but by all means, you want to get those that are realistic, that can be established and sustained. So that's the critical thing. What would be your process to identify them? Who would identify them? You're not going to hand a list to leaders and ask for their head nod. That doesn't work with this. Full alignment is them thinking through what really does need to be in place. How do we go about establishing these things so they're real, they live, they have legs, they have teeth, they actually do what they're intended to do? And then how do we sustain them over time? Because again, as things change, it's possible that any of your conditions might also shift. I will mention to you many examples that I've had with conditions for success put in place, and then things shift, and suddenly the leaders say, well, we have half the time now. And it's what that means is it's or half the budget or whatever, that it's time for renegotiation, because you can't possibly fulfill your initial expectations when you've had half of your resources or time taken out from under you. So it's time for renegotiation, which, by the way, might be a condition for success, that you're able to renegotiate based upon the emergent reality of the transformation. So conditions for success, simple, very powerful. And again, they need to be sustained. They can't be lip service. They need to truly, actually live. All right. I want to move on to the third strategy, engaging your people. So here's a background truth that we believe in. Human change happens from the inside out. If we don't account for people's reactions and needs, and we don't engage them in creating their future, we cannot expect them to sustainably change, no matter how much pressure we apply. You can threaten, you can punish. None of that will get people into the boat of being aligned with creating a new reality that they're a part of. So engagement is actually key. I want to share with you very briefly, because we could do, a whole day just on engagement strategies. There are a whole range of types of engagement. And I will share with you, when we introduce engagement to leaders and consultants, we first always ask, so what stands in the way of engagement? What assumptions do leaders make that have them not engage? And typically we hear things like, oh, it takes too much time. Or if I ask people, it's going to look like I don't know what I'm doing. Or if people have an idea and I don't like it, they're going to get mad at me because I'm not going to do what they say. Those are classic assumptions that leaders make. And when they begin to understand the acceleration that's possible by giving people a voice, they do not have to do everything. And as this model demonstrates, I'll just very quickly breeze through it. Sharing the rules of the game by different types of engagement, different vehicles of engagement is absolutely critical. Leaders need to just say, I'm going to ask you, I want your input, I'm going to consider it, and I'm going to decide. Or going to give you some parameters. You think of a solution that meets those parameters, you can do it. Very different approaches to engagement. And so this model describes the whole range of types of engagement that you can consider for any particular task in your change process, all the way from rote action, follow instructions without question, very command and control, by the way, up to asking stakeholders to begin thinking for themselves, then giving them some decision authority, and then up to the right, actually asking them to create, to engage in actually creating a result or an implementation process. So you can scan these. Again, it's moving from left to right, is increasing influence, the influence you give to your stakeholders, and thereby increasing their commitment and alignment. So I'm not going to talk you through these. This again is a whole nother program, but you can see there are a variety of types to consider. Now, what's critical with engagement is that this is something that we typically don't think about when we create engagement plans. Engagement is task-driven, and it addresses all quadrants. So the paradigm shift for us is early and often. So what are the early tasks? How frequently can we ask different stakeholders who have something to say about that particular task? So for instance, if we're envisioning a new future, which stakeholder groups might have something to say about really getting creative about a positive new reality? How could we give them a voice envisioning a new reality? Who would we ask? We might ask them. Another task is assessment of needs and opportunities. You know, project management very much focuses on let's assess analyze the situation. Most models do, but how can we use that as an engagement strategy for stakeholders? Because they're the ones living with that reality, with what doesn't work or what's possible. So how about asking? How about coming up with design requirements, which is one of our strategies I'll get to shortly. Design requirements are the parameters, the criteria that shape the design of the new state. Well, who might have input to design requirements? Clearly, the folks who are going to have to live with this new reality. You know, that's a great opportunity for engagement. How about coming up with design scenarios? Give me 3 options that will fulfill these design requirements. Which stakeholders might have valuable input, might see outside the box for design scenarios? How about impact analysis? This is a big one. If we're going to do design scenario A, what's the impact, all levels of system? What's the impact on individuals, relationships, teams, departments, the organization, etc.? And how about impacts on all 4 quadrants? How do we need to think differently in order for this to succeed? What impact does our culture have? What cultural norms might be standing in the way? Who might have input? Which stakeholders might you ask for that part of the process? And then course correction. It's a great opportunity to open the door, by the way, to all of your stakeholders to say, anyone sees us veering off course or getting into a danger zone, or that we missed something, speak up. This is where to take that input. You're safe. It's not a mistake. You're not, at risk here. We want to hear from you. Great opportunity for engagement, early and often. Always, and we know this, continuous improvement. So it's not just during the change, it's as we put it in place and we're finding ways to continuously improve, adjust, add to, expand, or shift. And so continuous improvement as well. All right, so designing your engagement strategy has to do with what in your plan, any of these steps in your plan, who might have input to it, what type of engagement given the prior model, and what vehicles might we use, in person or technological. We're using lots of technological, lots of Zoom, a lot of meetings online these days. So what vehicles would we use for engagement as well? So I would strongly encourage you to consider, if you have an engagement strategy or a communication strategy, rethink it through this lens. Rethink it. Look at your project plans, your change management plans. Where is engagement possible? How early in the process can you do it? All right. Fourth up is boundary conditions and design requirements. What are these? So this is hard-earned, this strategy. We learned this now decades ago, but really eye-opening. Boundary conditions and design requirements, they're explicit factors that guide the solution design. So for those of you in organizations that hire an external content expert consultant firm to come in and bring their specialized solution to you, if you're not thinking through the lens of boundary conditions and design requirements, what they bring you works for them. It might work for someone else, but how do you know it works for your particular needs? And so before you ever design, you're considering boundary conditions and design requirements. And they may be from all four quadrants or any of the quadrants. So what we're after here is defining, prior to design, defining the playing field. These are the rules of the game. So when we're talking about boundary conditions, we're talking about the givens, the must do or the must do not do. Do not cross this line. Dina and I worked several years ago with one of the two commands of NATO. And we worked with the second in command there, not the Supreme Commander initially, but the Chief of Staff for the Supreme Commander. And the Supreme Commander had given him a very clear boundary condition. For the transformation we were helping to orchestrate, do not change the structure. The structure is in place, it has to stay. Transform anything else about how we operate in this command. Do not touch the structure. Very clear, that was a given, must not do that. So that was very clear to us. That's an example of a boundary condition. I will share with you that it is leaders who need to think through boundary conditions. And if they're not asked to actually explore this, you will discover boundary conditions by crossing them, by actually stepping over them. And then suddenly they become screaming at you. Well, wouldn't it be great if you knew that in advance? And so this is a whole step to ask leaders to identify what are the rules of the game here, what's in and what's out. Design requirements are the criteria and parameters that the solutions must include or respect. So it might be a specific around a technology platform. It might be a business process that needs to ensure customer interface, or any of those kinds of things. It might be a metric that needs to be met by the solution. It could be cultural. We need to ensure that the way we operate, that manufacturing and engineering talk to each other. Whatever, though, it could be in any of the quadrants, but you're identifying the requirements that the solution must address, must satisfy. What's neat about both boundary conditions and design requirements is that they can be used to evaluate scenarios. What this does, good news, is that it radically reduces the politicking that takes place over, I want option A, no, I want option B. If you use the criteria, the design requirements as your evaluation tools, it reduces all of that ego battling that takes place. And so they're very, very useful to help clarify what we think we need, how are we going to get it, and what's the best option to deliver it. So very important in terms of the content of what you're doing. So I want to talk about the fifth strategy here is course correction. So transformation is emergent. We do not have, in most projects, we start at A and we're going to end up at Z. We know we want to get to Z and that's where we're going to end up. Well, transformation doesn't operate that way. We're figuring it out as we go and getting smarter by the day. And so it requires overt and safe ability to raise new information that is emergent that may influence where we're going. Now, by way of contrast, let me share with you, we have current reality and we have a vision of what we want to accomplish, ideally. The shortest distance between those two is a straight line. And typically we call this your transition plan or your project plan. We want to get from here, current reality, to their vision. However, in transformation, it doesn't look like a straight line. We are doing our very best going off in one direction. We're learning from it. We get wake-up calls. We're looking for feedback, telling you to learn and course correct. We take that learning, we explore what that information means, and we make a course correction. The reality is we need to make it overt and safe to input to course correction and consider course corrections and make course corrections. Now, because of the complexity and the pressures we face in today's reality, what we're after is establishing what we call rapid course correction, so that the curves that take us off the straight line are shorter and faster and more immediate. So this is what we're after in terms of establishing rapid course correction. Now, what are the requirements for doing that? First up, paradigm shift, overcoming the mindset that mistakes are bad and punishable. In transformation, we're doing the best we can with what we have. We don't have the answer. We have a vision of what we want to create, but we don't know what the actual design that we'll implement actually looks like. So we're figuring it out as we go. If your organization has the mindset that make a mistake and you're dead, or kill the messenger of bad news, you will never create rapid course correction to support your transformation. So this first requires getting very clear about the cultural norms and the mindset around making shifts to the plan. This is a major confront to project management purists. That is, create the plan, manage to the plan, reduce any variance to the plan. That's the opposite of what we're asking for here. We have to acknowledge that today's leaders do not have the answers to the complexities they face. That's tough for a lot of leaders who have a lot of expertise in history and experience behind them and think being a leader means having the answer. This is about, in transformation, this is about figuring it out as quickly and smoothly as we can, knowing that we don't have the exact answer yet, but we're learning as we go. So this is a big shift for leaders, that people can't look to them to like, do I do A or B? We don't know yet. Try them out. Let's figure it out. Intel years ago had a major motto they called "Go Ugly Early." That was about do what you think best. It doesn't matter if it's a mess. And so that we can learn from it as quickly as possible and then get back on course. So this is clear about recognizing you need to figure it out as you go. This is both for the content solution and the change process. It's about both things. And so an acknowledgement that we're figuring it out as we go. Now, as an external consultant all these decades, you better believe it's uncomfortable when a client is hiring us and says, I'm hiring you because you know what to do and I don't. Well, I don't always know what to do. And so I too may be figuring it out as we go. And yeah, I got decades of experience to lean on, but that doesn't make me 100% confident. So what we create is partnerships of inquiry, of exploration, of figuring it out as we go, with the ability to renegotiate, the ability to stop action, to say, let's look at what's going on here. Something needs to shift, and making that safe and legitimate and still getting paid for it and being valued for it. So it shifts our way of operating. Another aspect of this is embracing that stakeholders have valuable input. So this is about setting the conditions for rapid course correction up again in upstream as you're setting up the change to be successful, is that you are inviting stakeholders to have a voice and input. Now, you're not asking them to say, no, I won't do this. That's not what you're asking for. You're asking for their best ideas on how to create the vision. Maybe they've inputted to the vision as well, but how to create that? What would that actually look like? And to make it safe for stakeholders, including the unions, as long as they have constructive input. That's what this is about. And so it could come from anywhere in the organization. The gem might show up. We just don't know. So how do we create the conditions for that possibility? So you're setting up your course correction expectation, system, and process from the beginning. Now, one of the most powerful things you can do is have senior leaders model this. Model it to go right. They may have communicated and launched and they're on their way and suddenly, whoops, okay, we need to shift course in this direction. That they overtly communicate, okay, we just got smarter about this. We're doing our very best. We're staying on top of it and we're figuring it out as we go. We just got a new figure out. And so now we're shifting in this direction, or we're changing our timetable or whatever it is. But having your senior leaders model it, very, very critical. All right. So conscious change leadership, by way of summary, conscious change leadership is a breakthrough for how we approach change. And it's designed and fit for today's volatile reality. This is what it's about. So questions for you to ponder as a result of this talk. Do your leaders recognize the challenges they face using traditional approaches to transformation that may not be getting them where they need to go in the way they want to get there? Do they recognize that something else is needed? That's key. If they don't, might there be some kind of an audit or assessment that you do that raises data for them directly from the organization to help them see that the standard approaches that they've been relying on for controllable changes are not satisfying for the transformational complexities they face? Can you imagine your leaders embracing the possibilities of conscious change leadership as a new paradigm, a new approach? Can you imagine them? And if there are voices in your head that are saying, ain't no way, I can't imagine this, then okay, nice information. Thanks for spending the time. It's not going to go anywhere. You have to be able to picture yourself and your leaders embracing the possibilities of an expanded approach. That's really critical. Can you imagine your leaders committing to the personal development required to be successful? This requires them looking in the mirror, looking at how they think, looking at their mindsets, looking at the culture they are creating and sustaining in the organization. There is a significant leadership development that they go through. We have what we call the Leadership Breakthrough Program, Walking the Talk of Change, which is a whole process. The kingpin of it is a 3.5-day retreat where they deeply look at themselves, their mindset, their culture, and whether or not they're set up collectively to achieve the outcome they want. Very, very powerful and largely life-changing for people. That's development for them. And how about you? How about your own development? How about your own ability to step into this water? On behalf of that, which of the 5 strategies can you take on? Which one can you begin to deploy, even gently, even a soft launch? How would you talk about it? How would you address it? All right, so that's critical for you to consider. All 5 is a lot. I will share with you now very quickly, and then I want to open it up for questions. We have 2 significant development opportunities that we offer, one face-to-face and one online. The first is our Foresight program, which is a deep dive into the personal awareness, mindset, culture work, and the Change Leaders Roadmap, the most complex pieces of the Change Leaders Roadmap. It's 4 in-person sessions. We have it currently scheduled March to June. You can imagine COVID got in our way. We are scheduling now the completion of the remaining 4 weeks of our 2020 Foresight program. So fingers crossed, hopefully everyone's vaccinated, that we'll be able to complete that and begin Foresight 2022. The other is ongoing, it's online. It's our Leading Transformational Change program, the 10 key strategies for breakthrough results. I have touched on some of them today. This is a deeper dive This takes place over 12 5-hour sessions on Tuesdays, March through June 2022. Very interactive. It's all on Zoom, lots of information, lots of guidance, lots of project application. So we're offering you extra discounts for participating today. You see that information there. So I'm going to leave this up for your information. So you can write down the, how to register or to go online to find out more about these. But I want to spend just our remaining bit of time opening up, if you'll take yourselves off of, turn on your videos so we can see you. And if you have questions about anything I've talked about, please let me know, raise a hand, or write it in chat, and Diana will help monitor the chat so I can answer any questions you might have. So I've covered a lot of ground. What do you think? So I only see a couple faces. If you want to take yourself or turn on your video, if you have a question, I'd love to consider your questions.
And if you'd like, you can also raise your hand using the reactions. If you don't want to come on video, and you could take yourself off mute that way. We'll call on you. And again, or type it in the chat. So, Earl?
Yes, thank you so much for an informative time together. This has been really great. Area around me is a little bit clustered, so that's why I don't have my video on. But,
okay, no worries.
But one of the things that I'm looking at in general, when people approach change, is addressing the fear factor. When people are thinking about, I know how to do the old thing great, but the new thing, I'm not so sure. I think I may, mess up, and I don't want to look bad, and so forth. Where in some of these elements would you recommend approaching the perspective of addressing the fear factor, so people's intelligence level through the change that is so desperately needed is not diminished when they drop into fight or flight mode?
Yeah, very good, Earl. So handling the human dynamics, really critical here. So a couple of places in the change process are possibilities for this. And then there's direct one-on-one as well, or one-on group. Very early on in visioning, if the vision is compelling and exciting, if people can find themselves in it, they can find a meaningful place for themselves, and something that they aspire to, that helps with this dynamic. In terms of the process strategy to support them to make the shift, training and coaching, and a soft landing, maybe pilot programs, giving them a chance to try themselves out, but training by all means, so that they have a way to demonstrate or learn or build the confidence that they can succeed in the new state. Modeling is really helpful. And of course, coaching. If we expect, deployment is next Tuesday, and by Wednesday morning, we expect everybody to be 100% competent, that's ridiculous. That's just faulty thinking. And so how do we design a process of development to support people to get a toe in the water, a foot in the water, a knee in the water, to actually then be supported to develop their skills? Maybe we create out of your organization, your stakeholders, you create super users who are trained in advance. And then they go around and coach and support people who are afraid of failing in the future state. The last thing I'll say is there are times, and some of this is age related, there are times when folks that have been doing things for decades and decades and decades do not want to make the change. And maybe it's time that they shift themselves out, and the organization supports them to move out and still land on their feet, but not participate. So that is an option as well. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, it does. And I think as change champions, we don't necessarily want to give up or concede to failure, but that is a very definite reality that there
It's
are
a
some people
reality.
who do not want to move forward.
Yeah, it's a reality. You know, you look at the whole trend that's happening with thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are either retiring or leaving their jobs, whether or not it's from fear, they don't want to do it. And so there's a big effort or dynamic wave of that happening as well. Other questions?
Christine, did you have a hand raised, Christine? If so, go ahead and take yourself off mute. No, okay. And
Nope.
Lee?
Hi, thank you so much for sharing, Linda. It was very
Yes.
inspiring. I attended last webinar with Dean and just learned so much from it. And one question I have with transferring cultures is that right now with the Great Resignation, millions of people leaving their jobs because companies aren't matching their alignment. And so companies right now in the question of like, how could they transform? And so I've been doing consulting for a couple of startups and just like noticing things where they're in a phase of trying to figure out what they want to do. So in your opinion, what would it be an organization if like you were to build something from scratch? How would you build it in a way so that it is a reflective of the values and principles you have been teaching? Because
Yeah,
it's easier to start
beautiful.
something new than to change something else.
Yeah, such a great question. So I want to delve right into the co-creative approach, and I'm sure Dean mentioned this. So as well as appreciative inquiry, some of you may be familiar with that approach as well. If you gather people together who are, yes, of course, decision makers, but also the folks that are really the hearts and minds and guts and hands of the organization. It can be done in a large group format. It can be done in small groups. It can be done cyclically, that you're asking them to dream about a different future. And what are the needs that they have? What are the needs of the reality that they're attempting to serve? What are the needs of their customers? Maybe you get customers involved. Like, this is what I'm facing. This is what I need. Because startups, they may be a reflection of an owner's brilliant idea that maybe he or she or they had, a couple decades ago, and now they see an opportunity. Is it still relevant? So the underlying ask is what's relevant, what's meaningful, what's possible, and then brainstorm and sort through and consider and tune in and see what emerges, so that you're not locked into a preconceived notion. I mean, if it's technology startup, all right, it's some kind of technology world. If it's a financial startup, okay, it's some kind of financial world. You're not going necessarily outside of that. But what within that is most applicable given today's reality? That's what I would recommend.
Thank you so much for sharing. I've learned a lot from it, because I
Thank you,
feel like
Haley.
one of the challenges is that like when working with, or existing organizations, they already have structure, kind of what you place and how like, oh, don't touch the boundary, don't change the structure.
Right,
Oftentimes they don't communicate until you cross the boundary.
right.
And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you could have told me before that.
Right, exactly. I will share with you, I had one experience where I always, when I'm starting up with a client, will ask, okay, what are the undiscussables here? So that's a boundary condition. It's undiscussable. And so I'd get information on that. And with this one client, I worked with them, I respected their undiscussable, and I went in a certain direction and discovered that there was an undiscussable. Because they never even told me. I was like, whoops, how do I backpedal out of this? You could have sliced the air with a knife. Anyway, but knowing those things is really important for us, especially as consultants and leaders in support. So boundary conditions hugely important, and it takes some thinking. You can't just ask it and check the box. It takes some thinking. So I support that one especially. One
Thanks,
more
Linda.
question?
Yeah, if anyone has one last burning question, we're just out of time.
All right. Well, I have very much appreciated your willingness to stay on with this. Christine does have her hand up. Christine.
I think she was clapping.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. So again, I appreciate your time. I do hope you'll be able to step into some aspect of new paradigm approach in conscious change leadership. And if you are really hungry to learn more, please consider either of these two programs.
Thank you, Linda. And again, you can find out more about those programs at beingfirst.com/events. And you will all receive a link to this recording in the next 24 hours. So thank you for joining us. And thank you, Linda.
You're so welcome. Best to everybody. Stay healthy.
Bye, everyone.